Hello. Today we are talking short form works, getting them out there and publishing them. Fiction or non-fiction. How are you? What are you doing?
Well, my big news is right on target for today's subject, and that is that my youngest son's first published story appeared yesterday.
Fantastic. Where did it appear?
He has a story in Fantastic Schools Universities, which just came out, and it's called Draconian Murder College. It's basically a parody of Fourth Wing, but it's not in that way. I mean, he hasn't actually read Fourth Wing and wrote a parody of it. He just was really amused by the concept, and then he wrote this story that's totally unrelated. But it's funny. It's a funny story, and takes place at a crazy university where there are dragons and people try to kill each other.
Yeah.
So
nice. Heidi made it in here. I have been slamming as well, trying to get the based book sale for short stories together.
Right. I was going to see if we could put something in there.
Well, you better hurry.
Yeah. I'll see if I can do that today. If not, then we just skip it. But one of the problems is that most of the things I had went in the last one. But I will check and see.
That's fine. It turns out that this is actually the biggest collection I've curated for a niche sale.
Wow.
It had an incredible turnout. I'm just kind of shocked by how many stories have come out of the woodwork. And I think maybe the headline of it is just how many new titles there are and things like that. I did a little bit of seeding the concept out to the Raconteur Press folks, and I think that they got a lot of authors to kind of turn out for it, and luckily so.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could get one of the Fantastic School. The one that just came out would be too soon because Kindle doesn't let you put things on sale the first couple of weeks, first week or so. But which is a shame. It'd be fun to put just a story in there too. But the one that we just did, of Fantastic Schools Familiars, I may see. I'll just talk to Chris. Maybe we could put that one in. And then I could just pick one of John's, and that would be enough. You don't need a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff in there. I don't think anybody's going to be disappointed with the cross section of stuff. The only things that I didn't put in that people submitted were, oddly enough, like Christmas related stuff. I had 3 or 4 of those, and I just kind of left them.
Maybe one of these days we should have a Christmas related small one near Christmas.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense, right?
If we have a lot of Christmas related stuff. I have a story that has Santa Claus in it. It's not quite the same. It's not quite Christmas related, but he's in there. They go to his house Christmas Eve.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's, if not related, it's certainly adjacent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a novel. Only the end has Santa Claus, but he's in there.
Huh.
And the novel ends with him at Santa Claus's, with them at Santa Claus.
Well, now that we know the end, geez.
Well, it's only part 1 of 3. So.
Let's do just a quick little bit of news, because I don't want to get stuck on that stuff. So John C. Wright on the podcast this week. Jaji, I don't know if you've heard it or passed it around, but do so. It was a good conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if he has either, but I'll try to remember to remind you before it's done here.
I forwarded it to your inbox here.
Excellent. I will look for it and make sure he's seen it and puts it on his blog and stuff like that.
There you go. Film 3 Space. We're doing the workshop this week as well. We're going to be talking about pre-production and script writing. So there's I would say a decent amount of overlap between script writing and what we do here. We talk about it passively. There it'll be a lot more active. The Alchemist by H.P. Lovecraft, the audiobook version, audio drama and narration only. It's out. It's up on all the platforms except Audible, because of their policies. Volume 3 of the Exploring Our National Parks project is coming along. I actually just did my watch through and notes last week. I've got about 50 little corrections and tweaks to make to get that into shape. And I think the next version is going to be the last review version, just because everything that I'm noting is pretty minor. There's a couple little things here and there that, are visual elements, but a lot of it is like volume related, music related, and VO stuff that just needs to be patched up here and there. But runtime, I think, we're going to be at 45 minutes plus, which is the goal. And I want to say that'll be done by the end of this month. Will it be? We'll see. I'll probably be able to start looking at like subtitling and some of the promo materials, but I do feel like by the end of April I'll be getting it submitted for distribution. I just think it's essentially that close. It's kind of just buttoning up and brushing some stuff up right now as it is. But what have you guys been working on? We'll do that before we get into the topic for the day specifically. What have you been making progress on? How has your progress been coming? Jaji, you're already unmiked, so feel free.
Well, I have an editing job, which I'm very grateful for, but it's going slow. It's one of those things that happens sometime where the book is really charming, and I don't, there'll be a little bit of changes maybe to it, but I don't, it's substantially, it's not that big a deal. But there's a lot of small grammar and punctuation issues. So it goes really slow because like every line, I have a couple other authors like this too. Every line has to be fixed. But, once you get through that, the books often are, not so structurally bad, So I'm enjoying reading it, but it's slow going. I'm also editing my older son's second book, which the part I'm reading now I've read before. He'd only written a couple chapters of it the first time I read it. So, and that's always interesting because while his writing is also delightful, his spelling is quite unusual. So it's like a mystery. It's like, what word is this supposed to be? I know this isn't the right word, but what word might sound slightly like it that he could have picked off a list of spell check words? So that's always fun. So I haven't had very much time for writing, but I did decide on my own novel to drop a chapter. I just felt it was going too slow to get to the important part. So I took a whole chapter and I said, anything important in this chapter, I can do as a flashback in this other chapter much later that kind of touches on this subject. And I jumped right to the Tower of London scene, which is enjoyable because I get to act, I'm actually pulled up my pictures I got to take of the Tower of London. And I have a much better idea of how it's laid out than I did when I wrote the Tower of London. The Tower of London scene in both of my it's the one overlapping scene in the two books. And so I'm trying to make sure that in the second book, with the exception of like one place they have to both go because there's a character they talk to, or two places they have to go, that they see different things. There's so many things in the Tower of London. There's so many interesting bits there that it's almost like a different experience. I'm describing these towers and this one and those towers and that one. And I'm trying to, hit the important parts without making it boring so that if somebody reads both books, it's not exactly the same experience and they're learning different things than they did the first time. So that's where I am now.
Yeah, nice.
I do wish I could have gone during the day and actually saw the whole tower. I went at night and I got to see the changing of the keys, which was really cool, which is their ceremony for shutting the doors. But we didn't really get to look around beyond where we came in. So there's a lot of stuff I didn't get to see. But it was really neat. And I really enjoyed, and I've been made use of the photos I had. And, So pretty cool.
Next time you'll get.
Yeah. If I go back, I'd really like to go. I did get a picture of the tower cat, which is apparently quite her, whose name is Nixie.
Right. Hey, there you go. Heidi, are you back to full health? What have you been working on? How are you?
No. And
Oh,
see the ravens, Jaji, while you were there?
I did, but it was nighttime, so they're in their cages. But I did get to see. I actually have a picture where you can kind of see them sitting in their cages. I wish I could have, apparently the Raven Master was there, but not his uniform because he was just there as part of the person. And my friend who volunteers there wanted to introduce me, but we got separated and he got out before we had a chance, which is too bad.
Too bad. But I mean, you saw what you needed to see. I have a little book on it. It's like a little pamphlet on it, but it's from like the 1980s. If you want me to copy when I lived over there. So if you want me to copy or photograph some pages of it, if there's anything, let me know. If I can give you some info, if you need, but I suspect you've got all the information you need.
It'd be hard to say because on one hand, I've watched videos and I've been there and I've read things. The only thing that would be if there was something that was different from now so that I knew not to mention it, if you know what I mean. But of course, you can't really tell what's different in the past without looking at it. So I wouldn't offhand know what it was. But
what changed? I mean, it's been pretty consistent.
The longest guarded place, the longest continually guarded place in the world. They've been continually guarded back to 1081 or something, which is kind of cool. But thank you very much.
Oh, sure.
Anyway, anyway, we hope you feel better.
Yeah, I'm on my my third. I just started a third round of antibiotics yesterday, so hopefully that will end it.
Heidi, what have you been working on? Have you been working on stuff?
Well, yes, because I'm getting well. That's all I'm going to say at this point. I will be well soon.
It's important.
So yes, I got an absolutely excellent beta read on my short story for the anthology we're putting together.
Wonderful.
And so it was brilliant. And so it really helped me really fine tune the thing. And just, I'm been working on that most of the weekend. For that, I'm rounding the corner on I've got to get the fort dealt with. I've got to get that novel to an editor, Jaji. I have to do that. So I'm trying to get through that, but I've been a little slow in my progress for obvious reasons, but I am getting well. I will be well within days.
Huge.
So
I think that period where, you're recovering from something and you want it to be quick and it takes longer than we expect is always so frustrating. But the good thing is that, in many, many cases, it seems really long and frustrating while it's going on. And then, a week later, suddenly things are back to normal. You know what I mean? So we just have to be patient with ourselves. If you're patient enough, then you don't have a setback and you do get to go on with your life. But it can be very frustrating for, that period during which you're not really able to do what you want to do.
Yeah, well, it's that weird line where it's like you're really too sick to do anything, but you're not so sick that you aren't bored. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's the worst part. Well, no, I guess I'd rather be there than just in absolute agony, so I won't complain too much.
Well, Robin, you're the last person to give us a progress report. How are things coming along? What have you been working on?
Hi, thanks for asking. Yeah, so I'm my first book, my sci-fi, is out for query, and I'm querying one per week. It's a long process. It takes me about an hour and a half to send a query because of what's entailed. I don't know if I mentioned it. I got a really, really nice beautiful rejection for the book about 2 weeks ago from a British publisher who, they did a whole review of the book almost and said it's a really polished manuscript. We really like it. However, it's not for our readers because they prefer dystopian. But I was very, very happy and very encouraged by what they said. So I'll consider that a win. And I am halfway through revising my second book, the novella Sal Grundy. I'm right on schedule with that. I should be done probably in April, at which point it goes to my editor. And I'm actually in the middle of an interesting beta read. I'm doing a beta read for a sci-fi writer in my Women in Sci-Fi group. And it's so interesting to see other people. I think, Heidi, you said this. It's so interesting to see people's early drafts, and because it helps you also know what is good writing and what to look out for in your own writing and what makes writing good. So that has been really fun. And then just lastly, I've been sort of busy submitting to contests like my prose poetry, stuff I've already written, and places where they accept things that they accept publications that have already been published, which I have done like on Substack. So, all good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Robin. I mean, it's you have to come to the grips that your first draft is always just kind of crappy, and accept that, because whatever level of crap it's at, you can make it better. I mean, and it's just I'm not saying that directly at you. I mean, my first draft, I mean, I feel like the bones were there, but I had to really flesh them out, so to speak. And I think that happens a lot. I think it's more like that. It's not so much that it's bad, it's that you have to put some flesh on the bones. You gotta build the body, and it doesn't necessarily get built in the first draft. The first draft can be like a treatment to a certain extent. So
It's so true and
and
so
that's
frustrating, but it's just true.
yeah, it is. It's
The
annoying
less
because
it
you think
bothers
I've
us,
got
the
it.
more,
It's
the more,
brilliant. I'm done.
yeah,
And then you're like, what?
yeah.
So,
I had one time that I finished a book and I was so pleased with it. I finally got it done, and I sent it to my typesetter who loved the series, and to a friend. And my typesetter, who's read the first book at that point 7 times, I don't know if he's read it since or not, was like, well, and I think, if he doesn't like it, I'm in trouble. And the other guy did this whole analysis of what was wrong with it. It didn't take me. It wasn't that hard to turn it into a good book, but I had to go back and write two or three adventure scenes because I had a lot of slow stuff, and I had to drop certain stuff, and so it took me a few months to take it and turn it into something, that was good. It wasn't like it was all horrible, but the pacing was off. It was just too slow, and it wasn't interesting enough. But the thing is that some of the scenes that I wrote in order to add some action and adventure to it are some of my favorite scenes I've ever done, So it was definitely, I mean, I was really glad that I just took the attitude, I'm going to just, embrace what these guys say and not let it upset me, because it would have been easy to get upset. Oh, no, it's not good. I just decided to take to heart, and I thought it out, and I fixed it. And so one can do that. It's frustrating. We wish it was perfect, but we're grateful for the people who point out the problems,
Just quickly, I hear you, but I just quickly want to ask Jaji. If you look in the short story thing, the anthology we're doing, I put about 3 of them up there if you want to take a look.
I will. My son went back to college.
I know.
My son, who just had his story come out, went back to college. So I should have a little bit more time.
I drop everything too, and I
Yeah,
at the end of April. So
that's why I'm
doing it now.
Trying to get through my long editing job before I do other things, but I might be able to just kind of slip one in this week.
Just
On
pick
the
a short
subject,
one. I just want to connect with you if we're kind of on the same page.
yeah,
And what we're
yeah. I mean, that's what I was thinking. It's easier for me overall to try to like read them all at once, but I thought I'd like to do a couple of them just so you and I can kind of get started on, figuring out how we want to approach it. And then we, when the rest after the deadline, put a whole week aside to work on it or something like that. On the subject of short stories, just wanted to mention that we have 2 new Fantastic Schools that are open to submission. One is Fantastic Schools Parents Other. I don't know what it will be called, but in other words, the parents and staff that are not the main staff, people from outside interacting with Magic Schools. And the other is Fantastic Schools Isekai, which is your kid from your fantastic school going to another world or something like that. The funny thing is, I've written 2 of those where my main character went to worlds of Christopher Nuttall, my co-editor, but I did them for him because he asked me to for fun. I don't think that we'll put them in there because I think it would be confusing to his readers. So now I have to write a new one. I did those a long time ago. But anyway, I'm just mentioning those as short story markets that are out there for anybody who would like to write a short story. So there's a spot you can sell your short stories, which is right on target.
Excellent. Let us get into the topic for today, which is short form material broadly. I think we covered short stories pretty in depth last month, so we'll start with more nonfiction stuff, which I think is a really viable trajectory for a lot of people, partially due to the way social media works, partially due to the way that blogging works, just across the board. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for producing material that's more akin to reporting, or if you're doing it long enough and in depth enough, then to resemble good journalism even. It's definitely been the way that a lot of my early books took shape, when I was basically repurposing social media posts and blog posts into longer material, kind of tearing it down and then restructuring it, finding the narrative within some of that stuff, or trying to turn it into collections, whether those are chapters or entire volumes. I think that either way, when you're kind of working at these very like basic building blocks sorts of levels that we have on social media, where there's maybe a couple of pictures, maybe some blurbs, and then if you're doing that enough, then you can start to compile all of that material into longer form experiences and get more juice out of the squeeze. In that sense, you find that maybe people don't follow you on Instagram and they are willing to read you on Medium or on Substack or your own blog, wherever that might be. Certainly been the case for me over the years. There's stuff that's long tail material out there that, still gets reads years later. It's incredible. It's just kind of the power of SEO. And I know that right now, we're sort of watching some of those practices get gutted for a variety of reasons. I would say chiefly among them is just how bad search engines have gotten, but then also the nature of integrating AI into the way that people do research, for good or bad. I'm finding people getting sort of sidetracked by the AI responses in search as well. It is what it is. You have to be a little more discerning because, I don't think that AI is really sharp enough to rely on, but it is at least good enough to utilize as a jumping off point. I think that's okay. However, should you be using that for initiation and research on your own writing? Probably not. I wouldn't say that's going to put you in a expert sort of position for whatever it is that you're writing about or presenting in those materials.
I should say right on target and purely by accident. I have an article that I think went live today on authors and AI.
There you go.
So it's an article, and it's just a little summary. And the reason I did it was because one of my writers that I had once edited asked me to, because he used an AI to analyze my writing tips, and which I'll explain what that is in just a second, and analyze his work based on it. So in my little article, all I did was kind of go over what authors are doing with AI. And it was interesting because the list, we weren't discussing having the AI write your book. I kind of had already written that off as not what we're talking about, but the list of different things it was like, like 12 different types of things that people did with AI, which was interesting. Not, hey, it's writing my book, but bouncing ideas, looking for theme, trying to find plot holes. You know what I mean? It was interesting to see. The really quick on my writing tips, because that is article related. When my husband and I were young and we were writing, every now and then I would figure out some principle, or we'd come up with an understanding and we'd write it down. And I had this document called Writing Tips that I kept for myself to remind myself of things that I'd learned. And then over a period of about 10 years, I shared it occasionally with other writers and they really liked it. So in about 10, 12 years ago, I had a blog. I had a little, what I don't remember what you call it, where you have every week the same thing, article, I guess, on my blog, a column called Wright's Writing Corner. And I wrote some of the articles, and I had all sorts of guests. I would have invited you guys if I was still doing it. Had all sorts of guests from friends of other writers who came in and did a weekly column. But what I did for mine was I wrote up an entire article about each one of the writing tips and explaining it. And that's basically what my book, The Art and Craft of Writing, is. It's these articles that I wrote for that about the writing tips that my husband and I had come up with. And I realized that other people found them useful. So I wanted to, put some time into them. So that was half of my writing book. The other half was my editing experience. But, so that was a series of articles. And now I have it available not only as a book, but also as videos. They're not for sale anywhere at the moment. People just have to ask me for them right now.
Put them on Gumroad.
I keep thinking of doing something with them, and I haven't come up with exactly what I want to do. There were 3 different publishers that were supposed to, were interested in them. One closed because someone died. One closed, and the third person died. So I just kind of was in shock, I think, after that. They're good. I've had people really like them, but a Gumroad might be the right step. I have to think about it. I'll take a look at that. But, for a while, my agent was trying to find a place for them, so I didn't want to do anything with them. But he hasn't really managed, so I think I should do something myself. But
yeah.
Right now, I just give them for free to homeschoolers.
I think you make a good example about how to repurpose material into different formats. Not only were they blog posts, but they became a book and then became a video course. And I think that broadly, that's something that a lot more of us can do and probably should be doing for our work. It doesn't have to be nonfiction. I mean, we're talking nonfiction currently, but there's plenty of other exercises to go about the same thing. And I harp on audiobooks for that purpose, or for that exact reason, because it gives you another place to develop audience, to give them some other experience. There's, again, like audiobooks have been having great growth over the last, half decade or more, where certainly I don't remember seeing commercials on television for them years ago. Now you do.
Yeah. No, I think a whole group of people have gotten used to the fact that they can fill, like when they drive. You can't read when you drive, but you can listen to an audiobook, Never even occurred to me until this second that the audio for the videos exists. It's wonderful. A friend of mine did them in this wonderful posh, he's an actor out in Hollywood. He did them in this wonderful posh accent. They probably could be compiled as an audiobook in addition to being a video.
There you go.
I'll have to find out if the videographer still has them. And if so, I'll talk to my friend, see what he would want in order for me to do that. He just did the last one for the romance book, because I have a shorter book on writing romance that we made videos for. He just did the audio for the last one. And I was really delighted when he said, "Oh, that was really great. It's helping me with my acting."
You could just rip the audio off the videos and then...
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, just pull it off and compile it and put it up. I mean, we've done other ACX books with him. He did one of John's books. So I think I will look into that and find out how difficult it would be, and if I can get someone to help me.
Not difficult at all. Yeah, it's minutes. I'll be honest with you. It would take minutes to do that.
Could be fun. There's no reason not to have an audiobook version.
Yeah.
Even if just one guy liked it.
Yeah.
Just a little extra effort. I think I'll look into that when I'm done with the 2 or 3 things that are in front of me right now. So maybe in April, but it's a really good idea, and I think I should do it. Anyway, back to articles.
Well,
but those are all articles. So they were all done as articles, and then these other steps are, other steps we can take with these articles. So as you're talking about things coming up again or repurposing, I also wanted to say, and you mentioned we write something and it's out there and someone might see it many years later. Somebody I was working with on a different project who also happened to have in common with me that we both have adopted girls from China. And he told me he'd read my China posts, which these are the posts I did on Facebook when I was in China the second time. And my schedule was all off, so I was still awake a lot of the night, and everybody else was asleep, and I would write about my day and my experience. And I often have thought of putting it together in a little ebook, and I haven't. But it was so cool that someone had gone and found them, It just, they're all there. They're kind of funny. And it was just really neat to think, they sit on my actual blog that I don't use that often. It was just delighted that someone had taken the time to discover them and read them. I had a friend once laugh so hard he fell off a chair reading those. He's with the State Department. He recognized a lot of things.
Without spending too much time on a couple of points here, this is something that came up when we were doing the planning session. It's in the notes, but inverted pyramid and the Dave Barry method, I think you guys wanted to make some points on those.
Let me touch on both of those really quick. So inverted pyramid is, my dad had been a newspaper writer. He actually covered the Nuremberg trials for Life magazine. And he was a kid in World War II, and they didn't realize that, and they pulled him back because they needed people to write for Home Front or whatever the name of the I think it's called. Anyway, he often emphasized to me the way newspaper articles used to be written, which is that you put the most important information in the first paragraph, and then you built on it, and then you put additional details that might be interesting, but that weren't as important. And this, he said, was because people were busy. You're in a newspaper, people are busy. Some of them are only going to read the beginning. Your job, he thought, as a newspaper writer, was to get the facts to them. It's not this modern thing where they think the point of writing an article is to get you to look at as many ads as possible. So they put the information at the bottom. Though a lot of these articles nowadays, you never even find the information you clicked on. The clickbait. They don't even bother actually answering the question put in the.
Well,
But
that's not their goal. Their goal
yeah,
is to
they're
make
just to
click
drag
through
you
and get
along.
views. They're not trying to convey
Right.
information. The
Right.
inverted pyramid
But the
is
newspaper guys back then, they were actually trying to convey information. So one thing to think about is, what's your purpose in writing an article? If your purpose is actually to convey information, you might consider doing it in this method, which is the, top information, the real, really give them the basics up top, short and to the point, and then build on it so that anyone who reads the whole article gets a fuller understanding. So that's the inverted pyramid method.
well, and I would say something about it is that the point was they only had so much room for typesetting, and so
Yeah.
they needed to convey the information. But I think what happened with the internet is people seem to think, oh, I've got all the room in the world, I can do what I want, and then all this clickbait crap kicks in.
Yeah.
But the thing that's wrong about that is you may have all the room in the world, but you don't have people's attention for all that time.
Right.
People don't like it, and they will stop reading at some point, which is why you say things like, I never get to the information. And
Yeah.
now, I mean, so this is the point of it, is it's like you have to be engaging, and you have to be you have it, I view it like a meal. So it's like dessert is last.
Yeah.
It's not first, and they flipped the structure. It's just like RFK, flip the structure, right? You want your meat first, you want that first, then your vegetables, then some and your meat and your fat first. And
Years ago,
to think about it, because that's how people digest it. It's a perfect
yeah.
analogy.
Years ago, when my husband and I were not yet dating, it was right before we got together, we went on a car trip to meet up with another friend. And we drove through the South, and we stopped at a Friendly's, and we asked for our dessert first, and the motherly waitress wouldn't do it. She wouldn't give us our dessert before we ate our meal. No,
It's
we were
funny.
paying customers.
When my
So,
grandfather
these things are well ingrained. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, my grandfather was in his 90s. We went out to lunch, and for lunch he ordered a milkshake and a chocolate chip cookie, and the waitress bawled him out. And we both looked at her and said, "Dude, lady, this man is 92 years old. Let him eat whatever the hell he wants for lunch."
Oh, waitresses are funny. Anyway, so what's going on? There's two real forms. I will not count the clickbait form as a real form, but what the clickbait form is pretending to be is not top down, but an essay. So an essay is a form of writing that goes back several centuries. Can't think of right offhand of the name of the French guy whose name begins with M, who's kind of considered to have begun it. Montaigne?
Not
I'm not
really
sure.
an essay either. It's just
Well, what was I say? But it's supposed to be. What an essay is you're writing on a topic, and you're giving the end of an essay is usually the big deal. You know what I mean? The idea is you're writing a full work. It's fully together. It's going to present something, and it's going to draw together at the end. And so the Dave Barry essay style is based on the writing of Dave Barry, who's he used to write for the Miami Herald, but he was syndicated all over the country. And you can buy just whole anthologies of his essays. I own several of them because he's funny. He writes funny on all sorts of topics, but it's funny. But the thing he did that I really appreciate and that I recommend, if you're actually trying to write a real article and you're not a newspaper, so you're not trying to do it top down, you want it to be good, and you're not just doing clickbait, is that he would introduce a subject, he'd write his essay from that subject, and then at the end, he would echo back to the first subject. So let's say he'd talk about weasels, and then he'd talk about neckties, and then he'd talk about neck weasels in the last line or something like that. He did talk about neck weasels, but it was just a random phrase. It wasn't actually him tying things together. But the point of this is, and this is good for fiction too. One of the things I do as an editor is go through and make sure that is make suggestions along these lines. Is looking for things from the beginning that you can tie into the and nod to at the end, or things from the end that you can put a little reference or beginning to. Because if you put things in your story or your essay, and at the end they turn out to be needed to have been read, the reader feels like their effort was worth it. You say, oh, it was a good thing I paid attention to that detail because look, it came up again. Or, hey, look, this idea from the beginning, he's come back around to it. It gives a feeling of satisfaction. So, if you are going to do essays as opposed to newspaper writing, it's really good to keep in mind that if you can kind of tie your end into your beginning, it gives a feeling of satisfaction to the reader. And usually it's really easy to do. You don't have to go to any great effort. Just have to remember what you said at the beginning. I don't always remember to do it on my Substack, but I did on the one that I wrote about AI. So anyway, I really recommend a person thinking about that because it's one of those things where you're making a small effort for a definite enjoyable experience for your reader.
Let's get into the intersection of fiction and nonfiction, short stories and blogging articles. I know we've talked a little bit about this. I think this is a good place to move into that because some of the things I'm hearing, right, this inverted pyramid, putting the facts up front because you're limited on time, that doesn't necessarily translate to fiction. You can't put everything right up at the beginning. But the other side of it is if you're working on a longer article or you're doing maybe a series of essays on something, then you really do want to kind of reveal the story over the course of time, or reveal what you're learning, what you're researching and stuff as resources become available, or you're making connections in the material.
I haven't taught any classes in the last couple of years, except one romance class, but I used to once or twice a year pretty regularly teach classes online based on my writing book. And it was interesting because it's really focused on writing fiction. But occasionally a nonfiction writer would join the class. And then I would have the interesting challenge, and I always enjoyed, of figuring out what parts of what I was teaching was valuable to them. And it was interesting because lots of things do overlap. Having a good opening doesn't have to be about a person, but that's a lot of the things about an opening are still the same if you're writing an article. And in many types, if you're writing a nonfiction book, there are many types of nonfiction book where character is still an issue. If you're writing a biography, if you're trying to bring out the qualities of a real person, there are things about how to write fiction that overlap with how you would show this real person. And there were quite a few others too. Writing descriptions, for instance, is the same. Whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, you still want to, you still can do the same kinds of things if that's what you're trying to accomplish. So I think there's a lot more overlap at the basic level between fiction and nonfiction for writing quality, than we first think of. At first they seem like they're quite different.
Well, I mean, it's you have to hook them in either.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And really all a hook is telling the reader, this is the reason you care. Because you want an answer to this question, or you want to know what happens to this person, something about them just makes you click in. And it's really just about, a reader opens a book and they're like, why do I care? And that's and you want to tell them, as fast as you can, why they care. It's not, you should not make that a mystery. You shouldn't bury it somewhere. And I mean, looking at some of the stories, I saw that, right? I think in one of them, I'm thinking about it. It's like, you don't tell me why I care for way too long.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was the number one. We did a whole space on anticipation while you were in England, but the number one reason why that's such a big issue is so many books I've read, the author doesn't really figure out what's really important about the motivation of the character until near the end. So you get near the end of the book and it suddenly goes from being really boring to really interesting. And all you need to do to make the book interesting is put that same thing up front, so the reader can tell what is it the character wants to achieve. Well, if we know what the character, if a guy is walking down the street and he's going to the store and he wants eggs because he wants to make a cake for his kid and there's no eggs in the store, that you have some interest in it. If you describe a store with no eggs and the character is trying to pick up beef, nobody cares. You know what I mean? So knowing what it is the character wants is the thing that helps us know whether or not the story is getting somewhere. And if that's not up front, there's nowhere for it to go. I remember when my first version of the novel in the Unexpected Enlightenment series, a friend of mine mentioned, that she couldn't anticipate anything. And it took me until a little bit later to figure this all out. I think I went back and fixed it when I re-edited it. But it was my editor, my editor that I used to work for, who was my editor at Tor, who was the person who gave me the clue to how to do this. And then my experience working, in editing, I worked out the rest of it. But, you just need to kind of tell the reader, this is going to happen. Oh, okay, now it's getting close. Now it's here. And it can be one line here and there, but just enough to get the reader to go. And the same thing to a certain degree is true with articles. Because, the other thing that my dad would always, we hear from school too, used to hear all the time is tell them what you're going to say it, tell them what you said. And that's the thing that, kids learn to do at school. And I think it's for the same reason. Here's my paragraph about what I'm going to be talking about. Let's say, the national parks or AI or, whatever the topic is, writing. And then here's my information that I'm sharing with you that's really interesting and has cool factoids or whatever it is. And then here's my little sum up, because when you say it another time, it helps it stick in the pick out one or two important points. It helps it stick in the mind of the reader.
We are getting a little close to the witching hour, so I'm going to move things along into publishing.
Well, I would like
for
to
now
just say something kind of important about it.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, this is a great place to go look at that clickbait, because what they do is they start telling you all these personal facts about whatever character it is, but but you don't care, because that's not what they led you into the space with. So that's an excellent way to see how it's done wrong. I'll just say that.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, because there's no reason those clickbaits couldn't also be interesting.
Right.
For sure. So let's talk about publishing, where you can distribute your work, whether that's short stories or nonfiction. I think, right now, the relevance of short stories is high communally. So let's start there. I think that maybe historically there were literary magazines that created opportunities, and certainly those still exist to some degree, though I think maybe the heyday is past. As Jaji mentioned earlier, lots of opportunities in terms of anthologies, and let's make sure to mention Raconteur Press has basically built their house on it at this point. They are now releasing novels and things like that, but in terms of their track record, gosh, I would say they more than cut their teeth on anthologies. They're putting out, I think, 16 this year, and I don't know how many they have from the past, but they've got, I think, 300 writers that have participated in all that. That's sizable, and I think that reflects a great opportunity for writers, broadly and specifically.
So in the old days, speaking of the old days, what one did when one wanted to sell something was got a copy of Writer's Market. And it still exists. So I don't know if it's in an e-form now or if it's a book, probably both. But what it had was first a brief explanation of what a manuscript was supposed to look like. And I wish that information was still more available, because a lot of things come in what a professional editor would, more professional than I am, would probably just kick back, because it's not in a format that's easy to read. I don't mind changing the format, so I just do that. But it also would include, for both short stories and nonfiction, a list of all the publishers who were looking for this stuff and a little bit about what their guidelines were. Something like that is still not a bad place to start. A person who was starting from scratch and didn't know the market could still look up. I believe it's still like the 100th. I think Michael found the 100th one is out there, the 100th edition.
Just FYI on Writer's Guide. Yeah, I think that it's now like a pay service. So it's like a paywalled website.
Well, that may
that's
be
what it is.
It seems to me they would have moved online, and you had to buy the book, so it makes sense. But it could be it was really valuable in the old days. You basically couldn't be a writer without it. It may still be valuable if you're coming in and you don't know the market at all. If you do know the market, so when we were writing before the markets all changed, we had the following information we would offer, and I think it's still good, which is you look at what you'd written, you find something kind of like it, and your first publisher you go to is the publisher who did the thing that was kind of like it. And that is still another way to do. You read or write something, and you then look at where you're reading the stuff that's like it, and you approach them. And to approach them nowadays, you go to their website, and almost every publisher of any kind has some submission information about what they want. And you follow it exactly. If they say put it on yellow paper, make the paper yellow. I mean, nobody does that. But I'm just saying, they tell you what you want, and sometimes sometimes they won't read it if you don't follow it. So they just follow whatever it is. If it's a bigger point or smaller point, a certain font, you just give them what they want in order to read it. And if it's something you don't want to do, you don't go to that publisher. It's pretty simple.
For sure. There's also, just to kind of run down opportunities for indie writers, indie authors, those of us out there trying to establish audience or views or readership, or however you want to think about whatever your goals are. I think that is an important thing to set. But there's lots of channels, KDP, Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing is a must. I think curating this short story niche sale for the based book sale has opened my eyes to how much stuff is out there in the short form world. And I knew that these things existed, but I guess maybe in our ecosystem, I was not aware of how many people were doing that stuff. And it is significant. I would advocate for making that and other mechanisms like it, Kobo and Barnes and Noble and Apple Books and such, front load that, because that gets you to monetization. Whereas something with, like Substack or Medium, Royal Road, those are kind of, you're leveraging social graph, and hopefully monetization comes, and that's okay. You can establish audience. That's valuable too. You want to be able to drive people to purchase stuff. But I just think that when I'm thinking about social validation versus developing readership that is really truly supporting your work monetarily, then it's very tough to say like these 100 readers mean as much to me as the reader who actually made a payment. I don't know, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that these are things that you have to weigh.
Substack allows paid.
It does.
Some people have only paid,
Yeah.
So some people do really well with that.
Yeah.
Well, Road, on the other hand, you have to have something like a Patreon somewhere else. They don't take any money themselves. You put your stuff up for free.
They do take money themselves.
Do
they don't
really?
let you take money yourself. That's the dividing line.
Well, when John tried it at one point, because a friend was having good success with it, and at the time there didn't seem to be any way to get money through Royal Road. It was only go over to
Correct. There is not. They take the money. They take the money from the subscribers.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, you have a membership there. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, that's one reason I love Substack.
Sure.
Because it's exactly the opposite. I went from spending $35-$50 a month to maintain a MailChimp newsletter addresses where I never made that much on. Sometimes I'd have a newsletter that came out with a new book and we'd make money, but most months I didn't.
Right.
To Substack, where writing and sending things out is free, but people can pay me, and the only way Substack gets paid is if someone pays me.
Right.
And so, it's, to me, it's just delightful. It's like the exact opposite of all these other things where you're paying out and you're often not getting worth of what it is that you're paying out.
It costs a lot to be an indie creative broadly, but the subscription model you're talking about right now, which is available through Substack, that's a little bit more direct. There's also subscription models for other platforms. I know that. What was it? Vela from KDP was sort of a subscription model, not a great one. I think that's why it's failed. Then you look at other things. Audible is creating a subscription, a lower tier of subscription. Spotify has a subscription, and some of them are moving towards pool, which to me is the worst opportunity for writers and publishers. It's just the mechanisms there are not great. As for today, we are butting up against the end of the program. This has been good. I feel like we covered everything. We hit all the bullet points, which is a success. Even if we did have to move a little rapidly at times, that's all right, so long as we get through what's planned. That to me is a success. We are in week 2 of the March Grand Sumo Tournament. It is just totally up in the air. Ono Sato, after 3 days of straight losses, he removed himself from competition. There's only one Yokozuna. Hoshoru is up there. He's not in the lead. He's in he's one win behind. So he's got one more loss than the top tier of folks. I need to catch up today. I think it might be available. But you can catch all the daily action on NHK World. That is English language, Japanese cultural programming broadcast around the world and on your Roku devices. As for today, this has gone well, and we will talk again before too long.